this is Cam Wyland, and you are listening to the 22nd episode of the Wordplay Podcast. I got to enjoy a relatively quiet week, spent a little time proofreading an old story, and pounding through some blocks while outlining my work in progress, The Deepest Breath. I spent quite a few of my writing sessions this week stuck on a particular scene. With the climax of the first act fast approaching, I knew I needed to end the scene with some dramatic rise of action. But my setting, a farewell party for a young man going off to join the Great War in France, just wasn't cooperating. When you can't seem to get a scene to work, for whatever reason, something's got to change. In this instance, it was my setting. Trade one formal dinner party for one seedy pawn shop in the underbelly of London, and voila, goodbye writer's block. My blog tour is ongoing. This week, you can find excerpts from Behold the Dawn, an interview, and a guest post entitled How You Can Write Authentic Settings Without First-Hand Research. More details, including links to all these posts, are in the left column of my blog at wordplay-kmwyland, that's weiland.blogspot.com. Meanwhile, please enjoy this week's post, 12 Dichotomous Characters and Why They Work. Fiction writing doesn't offer many shortcuts or magic formulas, but today I am going to give you a secret ingredient in that coveted recipe for memorable and realistic characters. What is this ingredient? Dichotomy. If we expect our characters to jump off the page into three-dimensional living color, we have to give them multifaceted personalities. Human personalities are wonderfully, and sometimes frustratingly, varied. No one is 100% good or 100% bad. There are multitudinous shades of gray in all of us, and so it should be with our characters. Take a look at the following list of classic characters and the dichotomies that made them so memorable. 1. Long John Silver in Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. You'd expect a treasure-hungry, bloodthirsty pirate to be bad right down to the tip of his peg leg, but few of these bad boys reach the legendary status to which Captain Silver attained, thanks to his fondness for an upright youngster named Jim Hawkins. Silver may have been a nasty cutthroat, but his affection, and his actions to back it up, even when the going got tough, made him worth remembering. 2. Aunt Abby and Aunt Martha Brewster in Arsenic and Old Lace by Frank Capra. At the center of Capra's madcap classic are two of the sweetest little old ladies you're likely to find anywhere this side of your grandmother. In fact, they're so sweet, viewers would be likely to pass them off as maudlin cliches, were it not for their unforgettable desire to help lonely old men, by poisoning them. 3. Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. What discussion of dichotomous characters would be complete without mentioning the multifaceted Mr. Darcy, whose brooding paradox of arrogance and bashfulness, tactlessness, and generosity hoisted him to the top of the pile as one of literature's most fanatically loved characters. 4. George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life by Frank Capra. Grumpy, disillusioned, dissatisfied George Bailey appears on our television screens every Christmas. He's an unhappy and even unlikable man for much of the movie, but what we love, what we keep coming back to see year after year, is the inherent goodness, the unfailing selflessness hidden away beneath all that grumbling. We resonate with George Bailey because we see that same mixture of good and bad every time we look in the mirror. 5. Alan Breck Stewart in Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Alan Breck Stewart, the brash Jacobite soldier, isn't our idea of a gentleman, any more than he is protagonist David Balfour's. Rough and rude and crude as he may be, Stewart's last impression upon us is his unfailing honesty and integrity, but neither his brashness nor his uprightness would be nearly as memorable in isolation. 6. Jack Aubrey in the Aubrey Maturin series by Patrick O'Brian. O'Brien's deft ability to sketch characters has given us the inherently flawed and inherently lovable lifelong Royal Seaman Jack Aubrey. Aubrey's brilliance at sea and in battle, contrasted with his naivety and even ineptitude regarding matters on land, gives him a marvelous stamp of authenticity. And who could forget his unexpected penchant for classical music? 7. Jason Bourne in The Bourne Identity by Robert Ludlum. Killers with a conscience are perhaps one of the most common dichotomies in fiction, but few are as well-rounded as amnesiac assassin Jason Bourne. The entire story is driven by the question, why would a man with an obviously integral sense of morality willingly choose to become a professional killer? 8. Mr. Megorium in Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium by Annie Bode and Juliana Baggett. This whimsical children's story is certainly a stretch on reality, but the age-old wisdom and the intrinsic innocence of toy shop owner Mr. Megorium still resonates. How can a man who knows so much still maintain such a childlike sense of wonder and imagination? The question is never answered, but we end up being so fascinated by the character of Mr. Megorium that we hardly care. 9. King Kong, in King Kong, directed by Peter Jackson. The great ape of classic cinema may not be the best character ever put on film, but he remains memorable simply because he presented such a beautiful dichotomy. A primal instinctive killer who bestowed his own version of kindness and gentleness on the one person he loved. Léon, in Léon, the Professional, by Luc Besson. More or less duped into being a killer for hire, émigré Léon lives a life of silence and loneliness, bestowing his affections only in his diligent care of his Japanese peace lily. Jean Reno's characterization gives us a brilliantly subtle character whose seeming simplicity only adds deeper layers to what could have so easily been a cookie-cutter character. 11. Tom Donovan in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, directed by John Ford. Rough and ready homesteader Tom Donovan rides roughshod over pretty much everybody, including his longtime girl Hallie. But when the cards are on the table and he has to choose between losing Hallie and doing the right thing, he proves that what you see isn't always what you get. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, visit me on the web at wordplay-kmwyland, that's weiland.blogspot.com, and be sure to listen again next week.